Okay, well, this is the point at which I stopped the last video, and I just finished talking about the fact that we'd changed the driver's wish, the torque limitation and the smoke limitation. Now, of course, it would be nice to know whether we're actually going to have enough air from the original maps. So what I've done next is I've pulled out the original boost map. So this is the original boost map for this particular file. Now, at this point, you need to stop and think to yourself, like, how many boost maps have I got and which ones are working and so on. So what I've done is I've pulled out the boost map that's got the biggest number. So this has got the biggest numbers on it, and there were two that were more or less identical. And when I put this one back into the file, what I would do is I would replace this. In other words, this would become all of the previous boost maps if I didn't know which ones were working. Or I would try to work out which ones were working and just ignore the ones I know I'm not going to use and just replace the ones that will be used with this map. Quite often tuners just replace them all with the new map, and then they say to themselves, well, I must have everything covered because there's only one map in there now. There might be 6 versions of it, but there's only one map. Right, now let's have a look at what we've got here. If we look at the sort of values that we've got here, these are the boost values available currently. You can see that there's going to be a slight problem in the sense that what we've got here is injection quantity. The engine revs is just normal engine revs, but the injection quantity stops at 60 milligrams. So we're definitely going to have a problem there in the sense that we already know we're going out to 74 and that's only 60. But let's look at the values we've got here. We've got 2,550, so 2550 HPA or millibars. So we've actually got quite a lot of boost. Now if we go back and look at the sort of things that we've already got, I've just put some numbers on here. If we assume that we're going to burn something like 74 milligrams of fuel, and if we assume that the sort of value that we want to use as a fuel air mixture is 14.6, so we've got air fuel ratio of 14.6, then that's 1080 milligrams per cycle of air, and so that will be somewhere in the region of 2.1, 2.2. I mean, it actually works out as 2.1608. So somewhere in the region though of that, it's we don't want a massive amount of boost. So 2161 would be a reasonable amount of boost, but that's assuming that we haven't got any losses and we've got wonderful efficiency, and of course we haven't. So that's making an assumption that's obviously not possible. But let's go and have a look at what we have got. This is not a particularly low boosting file. Sometimes when you look at files, they peak at about 2350, so you think to yourself, well, I'm going to need more boost, but this is peaking at 2550, which is not too bad. So there is a fairly good chance that these values would be adequate for not only the fuel up here that's on there, but the fuel that we might need. So rather than change all of these values, what I would do for this one, and if I was going to change the values, obviously I would just make these values bigger. In other words, if I wanted to change them, I might change these to say 2750, and then I would just work my way back, bringing them down a little bit. So that might go 2750, 2650, 2550, 2450 and so on. But I'm not going to change these values. I'm going to leave all these because all these values are above the value that I think I'm likely to need. And there's a lot of them that are above, and they're all in the right sort of area. So instead of changing the values, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the axis. I'm going to shift the axis along a bit. So in other words, I'm going to move 60 down here, and then I'm going to rename these ones with numbers that go up to about 74. And so what I've done here is, as I've made a note here, I've taken 47.5, 50 and etc. All of those axes, I've just taken those out and I've renamed them as 50, 55, 60, 65, 70, 75, but I've kept the same values. So as far as this map is concerned, I'm saying that this amount of boost at this number of revs for this amount of fuel, that's fine. I'm happy with that. Now, of course, if it turns out that I'm not happy with that because I don't appear to have enough air, so I'm actually getting more black smoke than I was expecting, rather than simply start changing the smoke map and the like, I might think to myself, maybe I need to up these a little bit and try and give myself a little bit more boost so that I get some more air. Now, the advantage of not changing it is obviously the less changes you make, the less chance of making a mistake. But on top of which, if we look at this now as the values, if we don't have to make any serious changes to this, then we're not actually putting any more strain on the engine and the boost system than was already there from the manufacturer. So it's always handy if you can still get a little bit extra performance without changing the actual amount of strain involved in what you've done. So, you know, there is good reason for why it might be a good idea to keep it like this if you can, but you won't know until you've tried it. So that's the point at which I would leave it. I would leave it there. And of course the side effect of that is that if you don't change this, then you won't have to go and look for a boost limiter, although I don't think this file had one. But there will be a boost limit map, and of course you won't have to go and worry about changing that either because it already matches this map. So you've cut down on the overall amount of work straight away that you need to do. So it does have a big advantage. Right, now we've got enough air then, so we think we've got enough air. So we've actually got to the point where we've changed the torque and the IQ values to the point at which we're going to be happy. We now think the ECU will be happy because we've changed the amount of air it's going to give. So what we need to look at next is the amount of fuel. Will we actually get the amount of fuel that we want? So I'll stop there and come back as that.